So, Heather, so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, let's talk a little bit about like your story and kind of what this journey has been like for you. You're someone that is really helping people to find the place that faith fits in their life, their business, their journey. And I would love to kind of hear how that unfolding happened for you and then how you decided to help other people with that as well.
So I would love to share with you, Kelly, and thank you for asking because I'm really focused right now on the fact that I believe that we are all positioned for a purpose. We're not stuck. Some people feel like they're just stuck. They're stuck in their job, they're stuck in the town that they live in or city that they live in. And we're not stuck. We have been positioned. And a good example of that is, Kelly, years ago, my husband David and I have four children. And the older two were probably 4 and 1. So they were still in a car seat, a baby car seat and a booster car seat. So you have to know that part before we get into it. But we're driving along on this old country road. And I'm from Mississippi. I know you probably can't tell by the way I talk. But we're on this old country road. We're headed home late one night. We lived on a farm and there are no lights on this old street, none. And so we're driving along, and all of a sudden, my headlights hit this man from behind, and he is running in the middle of the road. There are no other cars around. And as we pull up closer to him, we see that he's holding something in his hand. Kelly, I realize in an instant that it is a knife. He is running with the knife. And then my headlights find the person ahead of him, and it's this lady. And she turns and she looks at me. I guess, she sensed the lights from behind. She turns and she looks at me, and there was sheer terror in her face. I mean, I have never been in a situation like that before. So I pull up, and for some reason, I am the one driving. I pull up, I yell to my husband, jump in the back. And, here we are with all these car seats in the back. I have no idea how he jumped in the back seat. We were in a Ford Explorer. And I stopped the car. It's like I heard a whisper. A friend of mine calls it a God whisper or Holy Spirit say, stop the car. Kelly, I stopped. I rolled down the window and I yelled at this lady. I said, get in the car. Now, how many times have we been told never, ever pick up a stranger? Ever. And I have these children in the car with me. So she gets in the car, we call the police. The police meet us at our house and they help her from that point. They take her to get her car. But that is when I realized, because at times I thought, why am I living in this tiny town when I could be in a big city? But when that happened, I realized we were positioned that night. Had we not been there, this lady may not be alive. And she said that he was going to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good example of how we're positioned.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, have you ever had something like that happen to you that you thought, wow, I'm so glad I was here because what happened could potentially have changed the trajectory of her life. Have you had that happen?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's been situations, right, for all of us where that's been the case. And I think it's so interesting because you say that, and I've heard, people talk so much about, people come in and out of your life for a season and a reason, but you don't realize that sometimes God put you in someone else's life for a season and a reason. And you're like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why am I still, dealing with this, whatever it is? And it's like, you're there for that person. God chose you in that moment to be there for that person, right? Versus always kind of thinking about it from a me perspective of, why is this person in my life? Why is this person not in my life? Whatever the case.
That's exactly right. So fast forward 15 years, and my husband came home one day and said, I'm ready to move. He had a list of reasons, but he wanted to move. We had built this lovely home on this farm, all four kids,
Yeah.
had this great life. And the next thing I know, he's selling a business and we're moving 4 hours from family and friends. Kelly, after we moved, I was devastated. I was so lonely. Just extremely lonely. And when you say those words, your facial expression just changed.
Yeah.
Because people don't talk about this.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
do not talk about it.
Hmm.
And what I did at that point, because, just talking about being positioned, I know that when I'm serving others, that's when I'm the happiest. I'm always the happiest. And so I came back to that and I just prayed and I said, Lord, I just want you to use me. However you see fit, just use me.
Yeah.
And Kelly, the things that happened after that, you will not believe. My oldest daughter was in college at Ole Miss at the time, and she brought a friend home who was talking about a podcast. Well, I was in my late 40s. I had no idea what a podcast was. I've been raising all these kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Running the carpool. Long story short, I looked up the podcast and found Dana White's The Slob Comes Clean. I don't know if you're familiar with Dana or if you've ever met her, but she is so lovely. And I started listening to her all the time. I would unpack boxes and listen to Dana, go to bed at night listening to Dana. And she became like a best friend to me, which sounds really silly, I know.
Mm-hmm.
So I was on the phone one day with my real life best friend, and I was telling her about this podcast, and she's a retired psychiatrist. And I said, we have some really funny conversations. We should record them and do a podcast, and we can be that person to someone else that Dana has been to me.
Yeah.
So we started this podcast. And then we started having people who are pretty well known that wanted to be on the show, which was just shocking that we were able to share this world with so many different people. And Dana White came on, which was lovely to be able to say to her, thank you for being the person for me that I needed, the friend that I needed at the time. Not long after that, my friend quit podcasting. And I had this conversation with my mother, Kelly. This is going to be hard to believe, but I told her, I said, I'm not having as much fun doing this now that Susan quit. I miss her. It's just not the same. And she said, Heather, this podcast is not about you. I'm sure you've had people say that to you, Kelly, when you felt kind of burned out or exhausted. It's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
So that night, I went in the bathroom, I turned on the shower, and I just prayed. And I said, okay, Lord, this podcast belongs to you. If you want to end it, I want you to go ahead and end it. If you want to keep going, I'm here. We'll keep going. Went to bed that night, and the next morning I woke with an interview request from CNN. So I was terrified. I was so afraid. And I did the interview that next weekend. And then a week and a half later, they called back and said, we want you back on the show. And I just, I felt, God, have you ever had this happen? Him say, you know what, you were afraid. We're going to keep doing it until you're not afraid. Yeah. The podcast changed everything for me as far as being lonely. And I didn't realize what an epidemic it is.
Yeah, no, it truly, truly is. So on that journey, loneliness is something that I think a lot of people feel but don't express or don't even know how to express. And I think that when you do feel lonely, a lot of times you fill that void with things that distract you, don't necessarily fulfill you. So what are some of the things that you would share with listeners today if maybe they feel a lack of, purpose, or why am I in this place right now? They feel so stuck. They feel like their life doesn't match what they had hoped or intended, in this time.
And I have to say this too, Kelly, before I answer that question is I didn't realize this, but the higher the income, the more likely that person is to be lonely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see that.
Which is really interesting to me. Yeah. I think we have to get out of our comfort zones because, we get really comfortable. We're at home. We're looking at Facebook, we're communicating over Zoom. We get very, I have my dog sitting next to me right now and a hot cup of tea. That is comfortable. And so we have to break away from that and we have to concentrate on what I talked about earlier, just serving others.
Yeah. For sure. I love when you said that you got in the shower and you said, the podcast is yours now, God, right? Do with it what you choose. And yeah, I think when you place things at God's feet, I think that you get answers that you didn't even know that you were seeking. And, it opens up things that maybe you didn't understand why, or maybe you felt confused about it, or, whatever. And you get these answers that come from all different places and blessings that come from all different places. So for people that are listening that are like, I need to have more faith that I'm in the right place, that I'm in the right time, that, I'm where I need to be, what would you say to them?
God has put you where you're supposed to be. You're right where you're supposed to be right now. And if you will concentrate on not what good things can happen for me, but how can I be a blessing to other people, all of it will fall into place.
Yeah.
Everything will fall into place.
It's so good. And it's so true, right? It lights up a part of your brain that you can't really get to otherwise when you do for others, right? When you do something for others. And I think it's so easy to forget that, right? We live in a culture that's so me centric. It's so self-centered. It's all about what you're getting and, how you're getting ahead and, all of these things. And I do feel like there's so much peace and relief that comes from having a mindset of being of service and giving, right? And, I think it's such a good reminder.
Absolutely. Kelly, one day I got this message from Fred Curley. Do you know who Fred Curley is? He's known as the fastest man on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted help with collaborating on a book project. Now, what are the chances of this? That's,
Yeah.
open yourself up to serve other people, great things happen.
Yeah.
Do great. I mean, my son was home from school. Can you imagine being 11 years old? I called him in the room. I said, come and meet the fastest man on the planet.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, just great, but you have to get out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. So I think a lot of business owners think about service like in the context of how they serve in their businesses, how they show up in the world, growing their company, growing their team, creating content, what they're doing for their clients. But for someone that's listening today that wants to think beyond that, when you're saying, really when you're feeling lonely or you're feeling down or you're feeling stuck, like think about being of service. What are some things that you would say to consider beyond how you're being of service in your business, those things I already mentioned?
Well, Kelly, I believe that service starts at home.
Mm-hmm.
It begins right where you are.
Mm-hmm.
You have to serve the people around you, the people that are close by. And for me, one way that I serve is in being an entrepreneur and just trying to find balance.
Mm-hmm.
Is the number one way is dinner first. To have this rule, dinner first.
Yeah.
Because you have a daughter. When she comes home from school, she probably wants to know what's for dinner.
Yeah, she absolutely does. She absolutely does. This is true. This is true. It's so funny because she literally, it's the first question. And it's so funny because I'm like, have you ever not had dinner? Like, have we ever, like, has there ever been a concern about dinner? But yes, it is on her mind. That is definitely true.
Exactly. And that is one of the most stressful things with the women that I coach. That is one of their biggest stressors is what am I going to feed everyone?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting.
Yes. I mean, out of all the things that they worry about, it's dinner. And when I tell ladies they're worried what other people think about them, they fear being judged, like people are not thinking about you. They're thinking about what am I going to cook for dinner?
That is hilarious. Oh my gosh. Yes. I love that so much. It's the daily struggle, right? Yeah. It's the daily struggle. I mean, I will be transparent. I don't really cook. My husband cooks. He's more of the
That's wonderful
domestic guy in the house. But he, even between the two of us, we're like, what are we having? What are we making? What should we make? Like, you're always trying to think of new ideas. So I get that.
Yes.
So what are some of the other things? Like, what are some of the other things that you would suggest to people that are like, I want to turn it over to God. I want to open myself up to service. I want to have more faith. I want to open up that part of myself that says I'm here in this space for a reason at this time. Like, how do you help our listeners to open that up within themselves?
One thing that I tell everyone is that you have got to stop and pause because we're so busy. Our minds are racing. Even in conversations, we're thinking about what we're going to say next. So we have to pause. We have to take a deep breath and pause. And then the next thing that we have to do is we just have to ask God, what do you want me to do? Mm-hmm. What do you want? Because we can make all the vision boards in the world. we can make all the goal list. I mean, I'm a very good goal setting person.
Uh-huh.
I
Uh-huh.
can have a goal set for you in 20 seconds
Yeah.
and have you on it. I mean, we can be great goal setters, but in the end, that's not going to matter.
Yeah.
I
For
mean,
sure.
it's helpful in making a vision board and manifesting. I mean, isn't manifesting really prayer?
Yeah. I love that.
So that is what I say first. The first thing to
Yeah.
do is ask God, and give him, a lot of times people will say, I'm so stressed out, I can't even think about what to do next. I don't even know. I have
Mhm.
so many stressors in my life
Yeah.
between business, my
I hear
company.
that from people too. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so that's the first thing. You give all of that to him, the higher power that you pray to, give that to him, and then ask,
Yeah.
pray, show me what to do next. And he
Mhm.
will, Kelly, he will show
Yeah.
you. I mean, I had a lady that came over one day to pick up her son. And I told her not long after I moved here, I said, I am just a small town girl looking for community in a big city. She said, Heather, you need to write that in a book. You need to write a book, put that quote in it.
I love that.
That needs to go in your book. That afternoon, she sent me flowers and she said on the card, it said, this big city needs more small town people like you.
Oh,
Ellie, I just sat and cried. That is a way to serve other people.
yeah.
That is
That's
how
beautiful.
yes, we have to serve each other. And I was telling another group of ladies the other day, I was in the grocery store and I was reaching up as high as I could to reach these bottles of juice. They're on the top shelf. This lady came over to me and she said, please let me get that for you. And I said, I was kind of embarrassed because how often are we in the grocery store and no one speaks to you?
Yeah.
No one. No
Yeah.
one makes eye contact. So I was a little bit embarrassed because I'm usually the one helping the senior citizens in the store.
Yeah.
And so I told her that I didn't need any more help, but thank you. And I was through getting the juice bottles. But Kelly, I deprived her of the opportunity to serve me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the whole thing about receivership too, right? Because yeah, sometimes you deprive other people of the opportunity to do something for you that really fulfills them. And I think sometimes you don't realize that, you know?
Exactly. So that's equally as important that we allow
Yeah.
others to serve us. And then they get those great endorphins.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so good. So, would you say this year the podcast is really focused on these themes like the faith and eliminating loneliness and kind of unpacking or uncovering why you're in the place and the space that you're in and what the reason for that is? Is that kind of what your focus in 2024 is going to be?
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
along with that, you're not too old and it's not too late because
Yeah.
I coach a lot of ladies who are about to be empty nesters or have
Mhm.
recently become empty nesters and they have a hard time,
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
difficult time.
But it's such a great time to start something new. It's
It's the perfect
it's
time.
the perfect season, right?
I mean, you're so much wiser. You have
Absolutely.
so many more miles under your belt.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Oh, that's beautiful. So, any other things that you would want to share? You told some powerful stories. I don't know if there's any other stories that you want to share with the listeners, just about like faith and action and opening yourself up to inviting God's will into your life, just ways that they can kind of recalibrate perceptions on things.
Absolutely. So back to my story about the lady who sent me the flowers. What I didn't tell you was, Kelly, that I had been homesick all summer with a terrible respiratory infection.
Mm,
So that night, I got into the bathtub. There's power in water, Kelly. I really believe that. I got into the bathtub and I just prayed and I said, I've had so many people tell me I should write a book. I'm so tired. I've been sick all summer. I'm just completely depleted, trying to
yeah.
keep up with these children
Yeah.
and this podcast and this business. And Kelly, when I tell you, the pages of my book started flooding my mind. So I got out of the bathtub. You've probably had a similar experience, walked into my study, filled up my desktop with sticky notes, and those were the pages of my book.
I love that.
And what happened next, I cannot make this up. So a friend of mine called the end of the summer. She said, "How's your summer?" She was in Phoenix. I said, "You know what? It's been a weird summer. I just finished a book." She said, "Who is on your launch team? This is so exciting. I want to be on your launch team. We need to have this big party." And I said, "I don't know anything about a launch team. I have no idea what you're talking about." She goes, you don't have a launch team?" I went, "No. I mean, I've just finished this book."
Yeah.
And 2 days after I finished it, I was completely well. That's another weird thing. It's like God said, "I'm going to make you be still,
Yeah.
write this book, we're going to
Yeah.
get through this." So I was completely well 2 days after the book was finished. But I said, "I don't have a launch team. I have no idea." And I hung up the phone with her, Kelly, and I just prayed. And I said, "Okay, Lord, here we are again. I finished the book. It's your book." I have no idea how to market a book. I've never written a book before. And a couple of weeks later, CNN did a whole segment on this book for Christian teen girls, sent it to #1 bestseller and #1 new release on Amazon.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's amazing what can happen
It
when you
is
invite
amazing.
that into your life. Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. I think what you said about being made to be still,
Mhm.
I think was really interesting, because I think that in our modern society, the assumption is that if you're being and you're not doing, or if you're still and you're not progressing, that you're wasting time, you're doing it wrong, you're not on track. And I love the perspective that you gave about, God creating that space for you to be still so that you could then make that kind of next big leap, that next big step of what was intended to be next for you, right? But if you're in motion, going somewhere else and doing something else, you miss that opportunity, right?
You completely miss it, Kelly. You
Yeah.
completely miss it. And so, and
Yeah.
I'm really bad about that. I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but I'm bad
Yeah,
about
we all are. We all are. Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's a byproduct of culture and society. And it's something that we have to like work against. You have to work counter to, right?
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. But there have just been some powerful things that have happened because of this podcast. Just,
Yeah.
and you have probably had similar experiences.
For sure. For sure. So where can people check out the show? #1. And #2, what would be kind of the parting words of advice that you would want to share with the listeners?
Okay, so you can find me on Instagram at Heather Pettey _. And the podcast is Life Coach BFF Show. Wherever you like to listen to your podcast, we're there. And Facebook is Heather Pettey 1.
Okay.
And the last thing I would like to share, Kelly, is really my favorite verse, because I think that fear is what keeps so many of us just bound,
Yeah.
stuck.
Yeah.
The fear. It's even the most powerful entrepreneurs still face fear.
Oh, 1,000%.
You know,
Yeah.
I get off this podcast recording sometimes with people that are very established and well known, and they'll look at me like, "How did I do?" We all kind of get that sense of yes. And so I would love to leave your listeners with Joshua 1:9, which is, "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous, and do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go."
Beautiful. A beautiful note to end on. Heather, this is great. Thank you so much for the stories that you shared and the mindset shifts and just the insights of the magic and miracles that happen when you invite God into your life. You ask him for his guidance, his will, his direction, and just for reinforcing for all of our listeners that they're right where they need to be. And he's placed you there for a purpose. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thanks for
All
having
right.
me.
Thanks everybody for tuning into the show. If you got value out of this conversation today, make sure that you leave a review and don't forget to share it with someone that you think it can make a difference for. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you back here next week.